The story kicks off by giving us some background on Virgil Cole and Everett Hitch. Virgil is a tough gunman for hire, and Everett is an ex-West Point graduate who decided that the Army life wasn't for him. Instead, he wanted to explore the Wild West. These two first met about 12 years ago when Everett helped Virgil during a gunfight, and since then, they've been inseparable. Everett has always been the quieter, less flashy partner, working as Virgil's second-in-command in towns, taking on roles like marshal or deputy. They're basically hired guns who only get involved when it's necessary to bring order to lawless towns filled with criminals. Now, enter Randall Bragg, the biggest rancher in the area surrounding Appaloosa. This guy is a bully who, along with his crew, makes life miserable for the townsfolk, enforcing his own rules and creating chaos. When the town sheriff and two deputies show up to arrest two of Bragg's men for a double murder, Bragg doesn't hesitate to take matters into his own hands. He kills the three lawmen, with a young ranch hand watching in horror. The town officials, desperate and with few options, call in Virgil and Everett. They agree to hire them as lawmen with Virgil calling the shots. His terms are clear: my way or the highway. He doesn't give them much room to argue, and they accept because, well, they have no other choice. Before long, Virgil and Everett find themselves dealing with two of Bragg's men making a mess in a bar. They're disrespecting the place, and when Virgil tells them to stop or face jail time, they don't listen. Instead, they pull their guns, and Virgil, quick on the draw, shoots both of them down while Everett handles a third guy who tries to sneak up on them. After a tense day, Bragg and his gang roll into town and meet with Virgil and Everett in a local bar. Bragg tries to talk peace, offering some kind of compromise, but Virgil, who's still bitter about the death of his friend, the previous marshal, isn't having it. The confrontation ends in a standoff, with Virgil making it clear that no weapons are allowed in town from now on. That's when we meet Allison French. She shows up on a train with only $1 in her pocket, and Everett notices her first. He follows her to a diner where Virgil is having breakfast. Both men are interested in her, but it's Virgil who steps up and tries to win her over. He tells her that as the marshal, he can make sure she has a place to stay if she plays piano at the local hotel. She's not a fan of the idea at first, making it clear that she's not in town to be a prostitute. Still, Virgil insists, and she eventually accepts the offer. Back at their office, Everett teases Virgil about his new crush on Allie, but it's obvious that Everett is fine with Virgil pursuing her. A little while later, the two spot some riders on a hill overlooking the town, and they decide to check it out. They end up having a small altercation, with Virgil proving a point by using the butt of his pistol to knock one of the men out cold, sending the message that Bragg's influence doesn't extend to Appaloosa. Virgil's temper flares a bit later when a man swears in front of Allie in a bar. Virgil completely loses it and beats the guy senseless, so much so that Everett has to step in and stop him. It's clear that Virgil has a strong sense of right and wrong, and when something pushes him, he can't control himself. Later, Everett apologizes to the man for Virgil's behavior, but he explains that it's just how Virgil is. If the town wants him as their marshal, they'll have to accept both the good and the bad. Time passes, and one morning, Virgil and Allie come down from his room, looking like they've just spent the night together. They announce that they're going to live together in a house that Virgil is having built for them. Everett is caught off guard, clearly a little upset that his friend didn't fill him in earlier, but he just congratulates them and doesn't say much. The mood shifts when Joe Whitfield, a young guy from town, walks in and says he witnessed the murders at Bragg's ranch and is willing to testify. Virgil and Everett talk to him, making sure he's up for it, and once they're confident he's serious, they set off to capture Bragg. They find him in a privy and bring him back to town, dragging him through the streets while his men follow but don't put up a fight. After Bragg is locked up, they start guarding him around the clock. His cell is right next to Joe's, and Bragg starts making threats that freak out the younger man. Meanwhile, Virgil's house with Allie is slowly coming together, but Virgil doesn't exactly know how to handle her requests, so he sends Everett to help smooth things over. When Everett shows up, Allie corners him and kisses him. At first, Everett seems to enjoy it, but then he pulls away and tells her that he and Virgil are together, and she can't expect anything from him. Allie, clearly hurt, asks him to leave. Everett doesn't say anything about it to Virgil, but talks to his regular visit to the local prostitute. She warns him that eventually, Allie will spill the beans to Virgil, and he should be ready for the trouble that will follow. Meanwhile, two other lawmen show up with the judge, offering to help keep an eye on Bragg. Virgil thanks them and agrees. Soon after, the Shelton brothers, a pair of expert gunmen, arrive in town. Virgil knows them, and although they're good at what they do, they're not as particular as Virgil about the kinds of jobs they'll take. Virgil makes it clear who's in charge, and the brothers, realizing who's calling the shots, go into the hotel as they watch Virgil and Allie go off for a quiet country picnic in a carriage. The trial kicks off, and even though Bragg's crew steps up to defend him, Joe's damning testimony steals the show. Not even Bragg's fancy, long-winded speech can bail him out of trouble this time. After Joe takes the stand, the judge warns him to get on his horse and leave town for his own safety. Meanwhile, Bragg is sentenced to be hanged in a different city. As the judgment is passed, Bragg exchanges a meaningful look with the Shelton brothers, a silent promise of chaos ahead. On the train ride, everything seems calm at first. That is until the train makes a stop to refill water. Suddenly, the Shelton brothers show up in the dry riverbed beneath the train, with Allie tied to a horse. They threaten to kill her unless Bragg is set free. Virgil hesitates, clearly torn, but eventually agrees to their demands. However, the brothers keep Allie as collateral, promising to release her later. Frustrated by losing his prisoner, Virgil starts pursuing them on foot while Everett returns to town via the train to fetch horses. A day later, Virgil, still tracking the Shelton brothers, Bragg, and Allie, reunites with Everett. Now on horseback, the two close in on the group. Just as they're getting close, they spot a group of Native Americans approaching the Shelton brothers' party. To their dismay, they also catch sight of Allie frolicking, completely naked, in the river with Bragg. Although visibly upset, Virgil and Everett shift their focus to the imminent attack. The Native Americans launch their ambush, and the lawmen jump into the fight, managing to fend them off while taking down one of their horses. Afterward, Virgil strikes a temporary truce with the Shelton brothers, agreeing to hold off their disputes until they've safely left the ambush zone. While on guard duty, Allie approaches Virgil and Everett, sitting between them and expressing how scared she feels. She admits her actions were a mistake. When Virgil asks Everett whether he thinks Allie would cheat again, Everett bluntly replies, "Allie just needs a man." Allie tries to accuse Everett of touching her, but Virgil confronts him, and Everett denies it ever happened that way. Virgil sides with Everett, making it clear he doesn't believe Allie's story. After waiting for what seems like forever, Everett decides to offer Bragg's expensive thoroughbred horse to the Native Americans, successfully brokering peace. With the tension defused, the group continues their journey, eventually arriving at a small town where Virgil and the Shelton brothers prepare for a final showdown. As Virgil and Everett take a moment to rest before the inevitable gunfight, Everett reflects on Allie's behavior. He concludes that she isn't a loose woman. She simply craves being the woman for the most dominant man around. The catch? That role constantly shifts hands. Virgil, despite it all, makes it clear that he still cares for Allie and wants to be with her. Allie enters the room, visibly terrified. When the men assure her they're not afraid since it's part of the job, she confesses her biggest fear: losing everything and being left with nothing. Virgil reassures her that he'll always look out for her, no matter what. As they head to the stockyards to confront the Shelton brothers, Virgil and Everett uncover a shocking twist. The town marshal, who was supposed to guard Bragg, turns out to be a relative of the Sheltons. Suddenly, the marshal, Bragg, and the Shelton brothers ambush them, leaving the odds at 4 against 2. In the chaotic shootout, Virgil manages to take down one brother and the marshal, while Everett kills the other brother but misses Bragg, who escapes on horseback. Both Virgil and Everett sustain injuries, but thankfully, neither is life-threatening. Allie rushes to Virgil's side, overcome with fear that he might not survive. As time passes, the trio finishes building their house, though Virgil's left knee is permanently damaged, requiring him to wear a brace. Despite everything, they find moments to laugh about the past, including Allie's missteps. Later, town officials deliver surprising news. Bragg has been pardoned by the President of the United States, a claim Bragg had made, but no one believed. Not long after, Bragg struts back into town, now decked out in a fancy suit and presenting himself as a reformed man. He even buys and renovates the hotel, though the source of his wealth remains questionable. Bragg attempts to make amends with Virgil, but Virgil isn't buying it. To make matters worse, it becomes evident that Bragg has the town officials in his pocket, signaling that Virgil's days as marshal might be numbered. In a heartfelt conversation, Everett confides in Virgil that there's no future for someone like him in Appaloosa. Virgil refuses to leave, citing his commitment to Allie, but he understands if Everett decides to move on. Everett, however, notices Allie heading up to Bragg's hotel room. Although it's clear she doesn't want to, she's adjusting to the shift in power. The sight leaves Everett disheartened. The following day, Everett gifts a necklace to a Hispanic girl and opens up about the one man he killed outside the bounds of the law, expressing regret. He announces his departure, saddles his horses, and heads to the hotel. There, he places his badge and a gun on the bar, instructing the barman to deliver them to Bragg. Everett confronts Bragg, punches him, and challenges him to a duel, slapping him to provoke his pride. Then he steps outside to await Bragg's response. Bragg grabs a gun and storms out in a fit of rage. Meanwhile, Everett's partner informs Virgil about Everett's departure, prompting Virgil to rush to the hotel. When Virgil arrives, he questions Everett, who simply asks him to step aside, reminding him that he's never asked for anything before. The duel is swift. Bragg is shot dead, while Everett walks away unscathed. Without a word, Everett mounts his horse and leaves Appaloosa. The story closes with Everett narrating his journey, revealing that his actions gave Virgil and Allie a chance to rebuild their relationship. Now, he's off to discover more about himself and whatever lies ahead. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to smash the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button twice to really show it. And make sure to check out the full movie. Thanks for watching.